A glass was dropped. The crystal shattered, making someone shoulda, a person who dropped it. The maid immediately crouched down, proceeding to clean the mess as she seemed worried because she had noticed the cut on the lady's leg was in front of her. She might not have noticed, but the maid was worried. Her name was Aria. She stood there watching her clean. The maid made her aware of the cut on her leg, making the girl finally get back to her senses. She looked at the cut and then at the people in front of her who had started looking at her, the pained expression, sighing, and her clumsiness. They started to whisper about her mannerisms and how clumsy she was for dropping the glass like that. Poor Aria just glanced at them while they talked about her being mannerless. They called her crude, and one mentioned to the other about what they would do to her. Her just looking at them dumbfounded, unable to say anything. While the maid glanced up at her, being sure that she would start crying any moment due to the embarrassment, because that is how Aria had always been. But instead of sobbing or letting herself exude as weak, she asked the maid to fetch her some handkerchiefs in order to clean the wound. The name of the maid was Jessie. She hurriedly got up, nodding at her to get one, while another girl was watching with wide eyes, surprised at how calm Aria seemed. Aria also ordered the maid, Jessie, to get her a few bandages since she had hurt her leg. It was bleeding, so she needed to dress it up in order to avoid an infection, while Jessie was already halfway through the door as she shouted, saying that she would get them in no time, and left the dining hall. Aria then returned to address the rest of the people over the dinner table as she crossed her arms on her navel and apologized to them about the commotion she had just caused unknowingly. She was sorry for ruining the dinner as she was not paying attention to anything at the moment. She then proceeded to add that she would end her mealtime with the group earlier today due to some reasons, although it went against the rules and etiquettes of the dinner table, which is why she apologized for it beforehand. She looked at the people who had confusion painted all over their faces and told them to not worry about her and instead enjoy their meals. She seemed sophisticated and rather calm than they had expected her to be. A chitter-chatter broke amongst the people as they were surprised at Aria for behaving so indifferently. She seemed unlike her usual self. They could not believe it that she could also resort to mannerisms as well. Everyone's eyes doubled in size, staring at her. They murmured about her being an entire different persona of herself and not the ill-mannered Aria. They'd watched her leave the dining hall as Aria thought to herself about her being so different than her usual self. She chuckled, thinking about how this new version of her was something so surprising for everyone, as they were only familiar with the older one, and now none of them would be able to walk over her. The other girl, whose name was Miel, watched her go with a worried expression while Aria thought about the memories she had buried a while ago. She had to return the favor to Miel. She owed her a lot. Miel had done so much to her, so it was about time she returned the favor as twice as she could. In the next scene, we see Aria crouched down on her knees while bloodshed was all over her. Her hands were tied while red metallic liquid cascaded down her face and arms. She was heavily beaten up while everyone was disgracing her and calling her names. She was ashamed of herself as everyone was waiting for her to get slaughtered. A man with a sword was standing in front of Aria. He suddenly called out to have the criminal lift their head and look up to him, when suddenly someone yanked Aria's head up, making her hiss as she met the eyes of the male, who told her if she was aware of the crimes and sins she had committed. Aria was silent. Her body was bruised. He then pointed his sword at her, telling her to be thankful since he was purifying her for the sins she had been a part of. Aria looked down. The ground became interesting as he added that her tongue is the greatest of satans and full of malice. He told her about the sins she had committed and been a devil's spawn in these years. Aria was breathing heavily, blood dripping from her mouth and nose, as the man said that after today, she shall no longer commit any heinous acts with her slanderous tongue. She was the criminal, but of what? She herself had not realized how she had gotten here in the first place. Everyone from the crowd was watching the criminal meet her fate, as a few children tried to get past them in hopes of catching a glance of what was happening, since there was a hefty amount of people. They also were interested to know what was going on because people were encircling a certain place chanting for someone's demise. One of the elders advised them to not to look at what was going to happen, since it would scar them forever and might even curse their souls, but curiosity got the best of the youngsters and they tried to reason with him. They said that they would only look for a while. He again tried to explain to them how they would not be able to sleep at night. While the male was leveling his sword right above the criminal, everyone called them to seize the villainous tongue, since it was full of poison. Hence, they advised them to bound it with the use of salt. They were telling ways to the man with the sword to kill the criminal and make her suffer for everything she had done. While the children, who were unable to comprehend the situation, were laughing at him, they called him a scaredy cat for not being strong, making the man call them out. He cursed at them for not listening to him. While Aria was on her knees thinking about how she ended up in such a situation where everyone was throwing dirt at her, she did not recall how she did such things, but one thing was obvious right now, and it was that she was in dire need of peace and solace. She was unable to say anything in her defense. She was ready to get tortured, as the man was about to slaughter Aria to make her repay for her sins. But a voice from the crowd made him halt in his actions as he looked towards the voice. It was a girl, none other than Miel, the same girl who was worried about Aria's different personality. The man who was going to kill Aria was her brother, as she told him to stop since she had something to say to Aria. She must tell her something, but her brother was against it and told her to not to come in contact with such a criminal. He did not want his sister to talk to the person who had tried to kill her, but Miel would not listen to him and instead begged him to let her talk to Aria as she removed the veil from her head, saying that it was also her fault that Aria was now in such a position. She wanted to talk to her for the last time and say some things, but her brother would not let her. She kept begging him over and over again. Her brother's words stuttered as he tried to say something, but Miel proceeded to walk towards the stage where he was alongside Aria. She looked at him and finished his sentence, saying that Aria had blamed her for being a thief and also tried to frame her many times, including pushing her down the stairs. But she also wanted to state the real reason she wanted to talk to Aria. Miel said all of this out loud as everyone listened carefully, when Miel also added that Aria had tried to poison her as well. She then sighed, continuing to say that all the heinous acts Aria had done could be stopped or would have never happened in the first place if Miel had given enough love to her. She might have been able to stop Aria from doing all this. She might have been someone to help her out of this, but she'd have failed as well. Her brother tried to reason, but words got lost in his mouth because he knew his sister was right as Miel looked at him and tried to make him understand that she wanted to bid her final goodbyes to Aria. Hence, she should be given the permission to do so. Aria was getting executed, and this was her final chance to talk to her. While Aria, on the other hand, was squirming and struggling to stay in place. Her feet were bloody, so were her hands. She was in a horrible state, while everyone from the crowd had their eyes on her. Her entire body was aching as blood was seeping through her clothes, her hair drenched in blood and sweat as well. Both her eyes bruised badly. They proceeded to murmur to each other about Aria trying to struggle her way out of here because she was ashamed. They then thought that she was probably scared right now because the very person she had tried to kill, who was none other than Miel, was standing right in front of her. They were surprised at her trying to lift herself up. Some believed that might not be the case. Aria was still struggling due to the massive pain in her body as Miel walked closer to her with a smile on her face. Aria was surprised that she wanted to talk to her, since she thought everything that had happened was because of her. She was ashamed to even look into her eyes, afraid of the disappointment she might see. To her, she was the culprit, and Miel was the saint who was trying to make the last moments of Aria somewhat kinder. Aria thought that it was not the case. She had done this to herself by committing such crimes. To her, Miel did not do anything, and before Aria could realize what she was becoming or comprehended the consequences, she had already become a very bad person, and she was ready to pay for it today. She was ready to die. Aria was ashamed of being like that. Now she was getting punished for tormenting Miel. She thought that she deserved it for trying to kill Miel. She mentally apologized to her as she now came closer to her, immediately telling her to stop squirming. Her tone was not sweet anymore like before, and instead it became deeper and somewhat malicious. Aria stopped tilting her head to look up at Miel, as she tried to say something to her since she was ashamed of even looking at her in the eye, but Miel leaned over to her ear, telling her that there are some things that she had been keeping to herself for a while, and it was about time Aria was made aware of it. Aria listened to her attentively, still not being able to see her eyes. Her once tired eyes almost popped out of their sockets as she heard what Miel had to say. She called Aria disgusting names. She called her a stupid wench. Aria was confused as she had always considered Miel as a nice person, but she explained to her that all of the servants that were working for Aria were actually her servants whom she had hired, Jessie included. It was Miel's idea all along to frame Aria by making her do things. Now she was a criminal in the eyes of everyone. Aria was dumb enough to not realize what was happening with her. She was stupid to fall into their trap. Aria then remembered how nice they were to her, and used to help her with writing her compositions. Never in her dream had she would have thought that it was all an act. Aria's eyes doubled in size when Miel told her that her servants must have added to her knowledge to harass Miel, and even try to kill her. And that was exactly what Aria did, and it was Miel's plan all along, while Aria thought that she had been turning into a bad person herself. They were Miel's servants, not Aria's. Miel was the one who had ordered them to trick her into doing all of that, which now led her to being slaughtered while it was all Miel's doing. She called Aria a stupid fool for listening to them and following them blindly because she was a kid herself and thought whatever she was doing was right. Everyone was watching Miel talk to Aria. None was able to listen to what she was saying or was confessing her crimes to Aria. All of them continued to murmur and talk about how Mealy was a very nice and lovely girl for forgiving Aria despite everything that had happened. They thought that she was praying for Aria. They were praising her upbringing. To them, she was a saint, but to Aria, she was the root of all evil. She was the reason behind the situation in which Aria was going to meet her creator. Meal, on the other side, looked at Aria telling her the reason of why she had done this to her, to which she enlightened her with the fact that when she had first saw her as a kid holding her mother's hand, whom she referred to as a vulgar woman, Meal wanted to kill her right there. Meal was disgusted at Aria since she was the child of a prostitute. Meal told her that both Aria and her mother were disgrace to her family, and yet she came into their house so confidently, which made Meal's blood boil, but she'd had to wait for the right moment to end her happiness. She called her a pile of trash, telling her that she did not deserve to smile. No one like her deserved to live and grow up in a noble family like theirs. She then raised her hands with a smile on her face, emphasizing that she'd have let the people know that such people deserve to die, not live or smile. She was going to show people their true colors. She wanted everyone to witness her downfall. Aria could not believe anything as Miel told her how happy she was seeing her in pain and confessed that she had also killed her mother using poison and thought she might do the same with Aria. She wanted to do it, but it seemed dull, hence she used the same plan, but in reverse, and made Aria fall for her trap by harassing Miel and making her become the bad guy. She made people believe that Aria had poisoned her drink and had tried to kill her, and to her luck, everyone believed Miel's side of the story, while Aria did her best to prove her innocence. To tell people that she was not the one doing this to Miel, but no one believed her. Miel started laughing like a maniac and told her that no one believed her since she had been indulged in many heinous acts before that incident, but she also admitted that Miel was the one who had manipulated her into doing those bad deeds. It was all her plan. She took small steps to get to where they were standing today. She laughed at Aria for being so foolish and not understanding what was happening with her. She called her entire existence tragic. It was a thing tragic that she even took birth and proceeded to become a part of her family. She continued to chant her name in a loving manner before holding her hands together, telling her that she was not aware of how she felt about their past, but she would always cherish the memories they had made together. She again put on a fake mask of being an innocent girl and trying to seem she had loved Aria as a sister all her life. She was putting on a show to win people's hearts so no one suspects anything. Aria's brows dipped as she realized that she was now putting up a fake act again for the crowd to think that Miel was the saint. Miel cupped her cheeks, lovingly disguising her devil aura as she sadly told Aria that she would miss her. It was breaking her heart to think that Aria would not be around anymore, but she would surely enjoy the joyful memories they had made together. In actuality, Miel was happy as she had finally reached her goal. Aria kept looking at her with wide eyes as Miel said that she would miss her and slowly stepped away while her brother called her name out, raising the sword above her once again. He was ready to kill her. The man that had yanked Aria's head up now stepped onto the back of Aria, holding her down so Miel's brother could slaughter her easily, while Aria was thinking about everything Miel had told her. She was regretting everything she had done by falling into her trap. She wanted revenge, but most importantly, she wanted to avenge herself for doing all this. She did not want to die like this. She could not die like this because she had to avenge herself. Miel's brother raised the sword and was about to slaughter Aria with it when she begged mentally to be given the choice to return to the past and make everything right. An hourglass appeared in front of her as she thought of it. She wanted her life to restart just like it so she could build everything in a better place and even save her mother. So she would not be deceived by her servants and make better choices this time. All she needed was a chance to make things better and not to repeat the same mistakes again, but to take advantage of the life she had been granted. A crack was heard. Suddenly, someone shouted her name, making her eyes doubled in size as she looked at the people in front of her, who were talking to her. She was back at the dinner table, where everyone was simply eating but focusing more on her. She had received another chance. Her wish was granted. The woman was disappointed at Aria for sleeping at the dinner table, and she does not have manners as well. She told her to be a little aware of her surroundings. The lady then told the maid to clean up. She immediately obliged and went to get the supplies. Aria was listening to her as she tried to understand what had happened. Her wish was granted and she had actually come back in time. She could finally start over. While Miel tried to gain her attention, asking her if she was okay, she seemed worried about her, which was obviously an act. Aria looked at her and smirked, mentally thinking that she had gotten the chance to return the favor to Miel, so she should definitely take it and make her regret all the plans she had made till yet. She would not let this lifetime of hers go to waste. She would become what Miel wanted her to become, a villainess. She would do everything she was supposed to and take revenge from her. She then ordered Jessie to hand her a handkerchief. Aria can be seen sitting on her bed thinking about something as Jessie, her maid, was dressing up her wound carefully. Aria kept a close watch on her, thinking how she was one of the people chosen by Meal to keep an eye on her and give her ideas which would lead to her downfall. She was the one who had given her ideas all along, which had led her to that horrific place in the past life. Jessie was taking care of her leg while thinking and hoping that it would not leave a scar on her. Aria, on the other hand, mentally created a picture of her tied up on her knees for the things she had tricked Aria into doing. Jessie's entire body was covered in blood. How badly she wanted to take revenge from her, but she had to be patient. Mentally, she made a decision about sending her to the stables as a way to make a better decision. She then chuckled to herself, thinking how she should not have done that. It was quite harsh of her to think about that regarding Jessie. She apologized in her mind, still thinking of ideas. As Aria rubbed her eyes, still thinking about it, Jessie asked her whether she was doing okay since she seemed tired, to which Aria responded that she was doing just fine, and she'd only yawned because she was feeling sleepy, but she was thinking about how she should have refrained from pulling Jessie's tongue out. It was not decent of her. Jessie apologized for taking so long in dressing up her wound. She panicked because Aria was getting sleepy, but she had to make sure that her wound could heal properly. Jessie added that Aria seemed quite tired at the dinner table as well, but also thought that it was so tactless that it was quite unreal. Aria nodded, telling her that she was doing fine, but was just a little bit tired, so she wanted to rest and requested Jessie to help her make her bed so she could rest. Jessie immediately nodded and helped Aria by taking off her robe, as Aria was whining mentally about her entire body hurting like hell. She kept thinking that maybe this was a long nightmare, as she could still feel the excruciating pain in her body as if she was slaughtered. As Aria was looking around her room while Jessie was preparing her bed, she could not help but cringe at her past self, considering how she had changed due to the current circumstances. It was hard for her to believe that she had such childish things in her room, such as stuffed toys. She was disappointed at her previous self for accumulating such childish possessions in her room. Her new self did not like this at all. Aria sighed and held her head, disgusted at her own self, although she was only 13. Her low cringe session was stopped by Jessie telling her that her bed was ready for her to sleep. Aria yawned and slowly got inside her bed, thinking that she should rest for now, instead of thinking about useless things. Even if this was a dream or the horrid one was, she was to sleep her sorrows away now. As Aria lifted up the covers and started to lay down, she immediately let out a scared scream, making Jessie, who was leaving, turn around in surprise. She was worried too. She questioned Aria if she was fine, to which she told Jessie that something was underneath the duvet. She thought that Neil was the one who did something. Jessie immediately lifted up the covers, only for them to look at the thing in surprise. It was a salad of broken metals and glass. Jessie was confused as Aria realized that it was an hourglass, but Jessie told her that she had put it aside when they were having dinner since it was on her bed. She was sure of it, but it was on the bed, broken. Jessie hurriedly told her that she would clean it up immediately and apologized for her lack of attention while the hourglass triggered something inside of Aria. She saw Emil's brother holding his sword up her again. She remembered that she had prayed for her life to restart just like an hourglass. She immediately climbed up on the bed, looking at its broken pieces, while Jessie advised her to not to touch the glass since it could cut her. But Aria was not paying attention to any of her words and rather was thinking about God's mercy on her. Aria was thinking about how blessed she is for the divine power that had granted her another chance at life and gave her time to mend her ways. He had given her a second chance to repent her foolishness. She was thankful for him. She realized that the Creator wanted to save her from all the mistakes she had done previously, hence he had given her another chance at life. He wanted a poor girl like her to live her life again, and this time with a guideline since she had been deceived before. She held the gold sand which was once inside the hourglass and let it flow through her fingers as she smiled, looking upwards, calling it the Creator's mercy upon her. She was smiling, clenching onto the pieces of broken glass in her hands, thinking about how he saw her suffering, and decided to give her another chance while Jessie's eyes doubled in size as she tried to tell Aria to not to hold the glass since it might hurt her. She can bleed from her palms. Tears welled up in Aria's eyes as she thanked God over and over again for giving her a chance. She promised him that she would become a better person in this lifetime and would not take things for granted. He'd have shown her grace after such a pitiful death. She praised the Creator for being merciful. She promised him that she would not live a life full of regrets this time and would make herself a better person and would make everyone pay for the things they had done to her. The ones who lead to her downfall would fear her. She would make their lives so miserable and wretched that they would pray for death, but it shall not be granted to them. She would bleed. She hugged the broken hourglass, smiling at the thought of her new life as she promised the creator that she would make the most of it. Jessie, on the other hand, was watching Aria with a confused expression as she called out her name in worriedness as she thought about her behavior and considered her to act differently since she was the my child of a prostitute. She remembered how Aria used to throw tantrums over small things. She was surprised how well composed Aria seemed right now, but sadly she knew that it was her origin and nothing much could be done now. She kept looking at her whose back was facing Jessie. Jessie thought that Mila understood this and the need to take care of Aria, which is why she had ordered her to look after Aria. She remembered the guidelines given to her by Mil, where she told her to be with Aria at all times and look after her actions since she had a lot to learn because she lacked in certain areas of life considering how she grew up. She told her to keep an eye on Aria, but it actually meant for her to keep an eye on the vulgar things so she could get her banished from their house. She was waiting for the right moment. Jessie hesitantly nodded, telling her that she would certainly look after Aria. She was brought out of her lane of memories by Aria interrupting her. She asked Jessie if she could get the hourglass fixed in some way. Jessie immediately responded that she could surely send it to a repairman and they will see what he can do. While Jessie mentally promised to Mil that she would give her best in taking care of Aria as she wanted. Aria then smiled and told her how precious the hourglass was to her, so she thanked her wholeheartedly, making Jessie laugh as she reminded her that they should dress her wounds first. Both of them laughed as Jessie thought that she would do her best. Later that evening, everyone was sitting on the table while the birds were chirping outside. A man put his hand on the table announcing that it had been a while for everyone to be present at one place. It was Count Rawson. He was Aria's adopted father. While his wife laughed at his words, telling him how hard it was for her to spend her days without him since he was away for work, working hard to provide their family with a good life. She had missed him. While Count Rawson said that that is how things turn into when someone has to look after their family, he was the breadwinner. The woman was Aria's biological mother. Her name was Countess Rawson. She told her husband not to worry since she had always taken care of the household while he was away. Both of them talking while a boy was staring at Countess Rawson, thinking how easily she had let out tears, such crocodile tears as it was expected from a prostitute like her. He was the firstborn of House Rawson. His name was Cain Rawson. Suddenly, Mila spoke up, telling her father how she was excited to see what presents he had bought for her and everyone, because that is what usually determined how much he missed them. He chuckled, telling her that no matter how far he has gone for work purposes, he always remembers his family. He had immense love for his family, however, he was always keen on ethics and etiquettes. Mil was the second-born daughter of the Rawson family, while Aria was the first-born daughter. Aria then politely proceeded to thank her father for bringing them stuff and always looking after them, although she mentally thought that he had never bought her something, but she then asked if she could recite a poem for them. Everyone was surprised at her request and questioned if she really wanted to do it, to which she had nodded, and her father said that they have a little time before dinner so she could do the honors. Aria nodded and proceeded to recite the poem with brilliant passion. She finished the poem, leaving Count Rawson stunned as he applauded her for studying hard, while her mother chuckled and added that Aria always used to read books when they were poor, and now she was also focusing on her studies due to the opportunities provided to her by the new family. Ever since they had arrived, Aria was working hard. She laughed out loud as Aria forced a smile as well, thinking how her mother was lying since Aria used to eat rotten grass to survive, let alone being able to read books. But she told him that she had been studying very hard, so she is not a disgrace to the family and does not end up tainting their reputation. She then thought how she was always being compared to Miel in the past life and for not being good as her, but she had failed to realize that Miel had learned everything before her, which is why she was doing so well. Hence, Aria decided to give up on studying because she thought that it would be too hard for her, so she decided on focusing on her appearance instead. Hence her origin of becoming a villainess, but that was a mistake she would not repeat again. Miel clapped for Aria and told her that it was a well-known poem by the first count. She also added that she had learned the poem when she was 4 and proceeded to ask Aria whether she was aware of the poem having a response. Aria was smiling at her and thought that this is what Miel does, but Miel told her that it was a not very widely known poem, which is why she had not heard it before, and said that she would recite it for her since she was in the process of learning it. Miel continued to recite the poem out loud as all the eyes were on her. She then ended the poem with grace while everyone clapped for her wholeheartedly, including Aria. Her father then praised her for reciting the poem so beautifully, and Aria applauded her for her skills. Miel was happy. But then Aria added to Miel's knowledge that the poem was written by the first count's younger brother who was attempting to assassinate him. She said that she must not be aware of this and mentally pitied her and thanked her for falling into her trap. She then told her that it was one of the reasons she did not bother to memorize it since its origin was not pure, although in the past she had memorized it, but now she was smart enough to not to make those mistakes again. Suddenly, Count Rossant rose from his seat in anger and addressed Miel for reciting a poem. Without being aware of its meaning, he was enraged and Aria's eyes doubled in size while Miele trembled in fear. He had never shouted at her. Aria then remembered how her brother, Cain Rossant, had called out her for the same thing in pure rage, mocking her lowly birth, which was not even her fault, and threatened her for risking the reputation of their nobles by mocking them through imitation. He had behaved very rudely to her in the past, but now he dared not to utter a single word. He was quite calm, since it was his sister who was getting scolded now. It was the exact situation, but the roles were now reversed, which showed the discrimination of the house for the Rossant family. Cain was sitting there normally. He kept glaring at her, while Count Rossant, their father, explained to them how this specific poem was a banned poem until few generations back, since it had a vulgar speech and use of inappropriate words and curses, including metaphorical cursing for one's family, and someone from a noble family reciting it would be a disgrace. Hence, he decided that he would assume that Miele had memorized it without truly knowing its meaning. Everyone nodded except for Cain, while Miele was trembling in fear since it was the first time she had gotten shouted at. Aria was smart for doing this, as she thought how accurate it was for her to assume that Miele must have memorized the entire book without even truly understanding the meaning behind them, so it was easy for her to point it out. She took advantage of Miele's overconfidence. The poor worker was traumatized as well as he stuttered while announcing that dinner shall be served soon. He hurriedly called out the servants to start arranging the dishes and food so everyone could eat. Cain Rossant, on the other side, patted Miele's head softly as he caressed her hair, praising her for actually memorizing an entire poem, considering how she was only a child of 13 years of age. He took his sister's side while Miele mumbled a small thank you to him. Aria noticed this and groaned, thinking how both of the Rossant siblings got along well no matter what. Had it been her reciting the poem, he would have cursed at her and would have called her a lowlife. But it was the opposite case. She then decided to not to think about it, and instead devour the lovely food in front of her. Aria took a bite and smiled, thanking God for giving her such good food to enjoy. She was happy now. It was a satisfactory day.